I will indeed enter the simulation. Once again, what's going on, people? We're back. It's another episode of WandaVision Recap. I haven't quite thought of another cool nickname for this show yet, the way that I thought of Mando Watch. There's something that's like not quite flowing as easily on the tongue, on the brain for this one, but we'll get to it. I'm myself, the movie nerd is here, the TV nerd is here. We have our second guest of the series on, Mr. John Burns of Burns Reviews. What's going on, dude? Happy to have you here.
How's it going, man? It's good to be here. I've seen you guys. I've seen your show a little bit. I've seen both of you. You guys seem pretty chill. How you guys doing?
Doing good, man.
Doing
And
good.
you seem chill as well. You know, you could sense that East Coaster energy, you know? We've all we all have that similar mindset. So it's going to be a good time tonight, man. We appreciate you hanging with us. And of course, guys, go check out his channel, Burns Reviews on YouTube, and all the links will be in the description after the show. Please go support him. Dom, we have one hell of a show tonight, don't we?
Yes, we do. But real quick, Chris, I just wanted to point out, I wanted to do a retroactive correction from last week, because last week I was unable to give the episodes any actual titles because they were only credited on Disney Plus as episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But the good news is that, Chris, we actually have some episode names. So retroactively, last week's review was officially a review of episodes 1, filmed before a live studio audience, and 2, Don't Touch That Dial. And tonight, we will be reviewing the brand new episode that was mostly made available to a lot of, big name critiquers right now. But unfortunately, we, the humble human beings that we are, unfortunately having to continue to kiss up to Disney for views. But hey, you know what? It's fine because that's what everyone's doing right now. So hey, I had a better joke planned on that segment because I was going to do some variation of that every week, but I'll get to that. But so tonight, we are reviewing episode 3, Now in Color, which I feel like is such a perfect description for this episode, just overall for what it accomplishes. But whether this will continue to scratch that MCU itch that we're all feeling, or just continue to piss off those who frankly never enjoyed it to begin with, let's begin. So, Chris, before we dove in, like, what, did you have like any hope that this was going to be better than last week, or has the cynicism already taken over? You're already like, no, I can, like, this has already annoyed me to the point where I can't even appreciate this.
No, never. Like I said at the end of last week, I give everything a fair shake because as someone who creates art, I want, if you don't like my first 3 albums, maybe you like my 4th. And I just think that's the way you have to treat it. For example, I'm a diehard Weezer fan. They're in my top 10 favorite bands of all time, although I think they only have 4 good albums out of 13. But that does not take away from those 4 albums that are great. They just made 7 albums that I don't really care for too much. And that's just kind of how it is. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I give everything a fair shake, and I'm glad I did this week because I will just, spoiler alert, my initial reaction, slight improvement. But we'll get into it because there are clearly always going to be things I dislike when it comes to Marvel.
And of course, we have a guest here. So real quick, first impression going into this week, Johnny Boy, what did you think well, first off, what were your kind of quick impressions of last week's episodes? Just like kind of the refreshing, diving back into the MCU, and then like how that fed your feelings going into this episode.
Well, first of all, I think it's kind of fascinating, like you said, that they actually just got around to labeling the actual shows. Like, that seems like a thing that, like, you would see here with us on YouTube. Like, oh, I forgot to label it. Like, you're Disney. How do you forget to label your shows on the biggest platform that you just put out? So that's cool. That's a thing. But as far as my impression of the show, you're right. I mean, for me personally, I'm looking forward to Loki. Kind of looking forward to Winter Soldier. This was like not really on my I can't wait for list. It was like, yeah, okay, whatever. First 2 episodes, I was like, this is bad. I mean, not bad, but I mean, we're so spoiled by the MCU with the action and the when we just walked out of Endgame. I mean, so we started up here, and now, like, we're watching a love letter to TV land because Kevin Feige seems to have like a kind of hard on for that kind of thing. Yeah, I didn't love it. I remember watching the second episode of it going, wow, they just showed us the recap of episode 1, but the recap is kind of all you really needed because the rest of it was all fluff. It was all, I Love Lucy kind of stuff. So didn't love 1 and 2. Kind of like Chris said, though, I do think 3 was a lot better. We're actually starting to get a little bit of momentum. The train has left the station and we're moving. Yeah, I think episode 3 is my favorite thus far, I guess.
Yeah.
you have a lot of
We do have a
interesting
wild
stuff that kind of raises a couple eyebrows.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
definitely.
we have
yeah.
a long and interesting ride ahead
Yeah,
of
we
us.
do.
I hope it gets more interesting. Dom, before I let you take that, I do want to turn our attention to the chat. We have
Of
some
course,
folks,
as
folks
always.
hanging out with us tonight. Jay Manley, thanks for being here as always. And of course, Stranger Boy, and everyone else who's listening and not chatting. Hey guys, don't be afraid. Leave a comment. We'd love to talk to you. There's a lot of
Seriously,
you
we
guys who
enjoy
kind of
talking.
hang out and don't really communicate, which is fine. I get it. I was a shy kid too, but we'd love to chat. And if you guys want to let us know what you think in the comments, let us know what you think in the comments. Do not be afraid. This is a friendly community. Dom, what were you going to say?
Talkin is literally in our title overall.
True. We'd love to talk with you. So yeah, Dom, dude, shall we
Yeah,
kind of
I was
crack
gonna
into
say-
this episode?
Yeah, I was real quick. I was gonna say it was interesting how even with the stylish change, it's like the transition overall to more modernity. Like people seem to be more comfortable with it than the kind of awkward stylisms of the first two episodes. So that's just automatically kind of more comforting to the mind stylistically. But also, once again, they're doing not exactly a Watchmen ripoff, because Watchmen, I think, did this much better as far as folding the mystery overall into the plot. This one is still hinting at it, but the hints have gotten bigger, especially with two very, very deep cuts as far as hinting at where the future of the MCU could go. So with that being said, people, let us dive in. This is section 1 of the recap show, that being the actual recap section itself. So the plot, once again, directed by Matt Shackman and written this time by Megan McDonnell. So they're now actually announcing writers as well for this. Overall showrunner Jack Schaefer. What's it called? Inexplicably, following up the plot point at the end of the last episode, Wanda is now pregnant. And she is, of course, progressing at an alarming rate to the point where even Vision with his own android self cannot keep up. Will they be able? But unfortunately, as time is going on and Wanda is magicking things up around them, strange visual cues start popping up that point to, once again, the fact that this reality is not at all real. Meanwhile, Vision encounters some strange activities from the neighbors outside as the whole reality seems to start turning into a David Lynchian nightmare inexplicably, with the hints becoming even stronger as far as the greater universe and what's happening outside. We got some big deep cut episodes this moment, some very strong hints as to some characters coming at a later point overall. But once again, I'd say that the show is continuing to hint towards Wanda's overall and continued destabilization from possibly an attempt to resurrect Vision, I believe, is if what I've been hearing is true. So again, not a very long recap, but I feel like that covers pretty much everything that happens overall. Of course, at the end of the episode, once Wanda has progressed to the point of a full 9 months and is ready to give birth within a matter of hours, she gives birth, of course, to twins Billy and Tommy, who, of course, for any Young Avengers diehard fans will know, eventually become the Young Avengers members Wiccan and Speed. More on them later in the connection to the greater overall comic book verse. So, with that being said, John, you have a point?
I have a question, and it might be a
Yes.
dumb question. If there's like an MCU diehard fan down the chat, maybe they can let me know. Do you guys know where the Mind Stone is, like at the moment? Because I know Cap was supposed to bring all the stones back, and obviously everything, like what their logic is, like whatever happened. Vision was killed by Thanos before all that. So is there just no Mind? Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so here's the thing. We'll cover this. Let's put a pin in this. No, here's the thing. This
Okay.
is good. We'll put a pin in this. We'll save it for connection to the greater overall MCU universe because, yes, you're right, but this just sparked an idea in my mind as far as how this could tie to everything else.
I was just like, if you had like
That
a
is
quick,
a good
like,
question.
if you knew or didn't.
Right, it is a very
you know
good
what I mean?
question, but we will answer it later, and
See,
it'll come to the point
the
that
thing
in my
is-
head.
that is something that they have not made clear about the Loki show either. What the hell exactly is going on? How is this possible? The how is this possible is something that I think we still don't know, but I trust Dom when he says it's going to be worth it to discuss it later on.
Yeah,
But that
well,
is a
the-
great question. There's
Yeah,
that
well,
is
also the weird thing
because I
just
forgot,
about
man.
Loki-
Endgame was so freaking long ago.
The weird thing
Right?
about Loki was that Loki was the only one that was specifically hinted at in Endgame. When you see 2012 Loki pick up the Tesseract and use it to get away, that's the only
Yeah, that's
other
true.
one.
Right.
Like Falcon and Winter Soldier and at least WandaVision seem to be like natural progressions, but you know we still have no idea right now. So with that
Just by
being
the
said, that's
nature of WandaVision, though, it's like hard to
Pretty
exactly tell what's going on, and it
Pretty
kind of.
much.
But yeah, I feel you, man.
so. With that being said,
I'm just
pretty much-
making sure I didn't like forget anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No,
I hear
totally.
ya.
I mean, same here, dude. Endgame was so long ago at this point. It's
2
been a
years.
crazy year of 2020. Like, I've certainly have the same questions you have.
Yeah. So, with that being said, let's move on to positives and negatives. What our overall thoughts kind of were, just initial impressions coming off of the episode. So, John, you go first. What did you think of the newest episode, now in color?
I enjoyed it. I mean, you know, considering it, anything that's an improvement from the first episode, I thought it was a lot better. That the second episode, was it when he ate the gum by mistake and then his gears were kind of clogged up and then he couldn't do his magic trick. I was like, what are we doing? What is the point of this? It kind of it's starting to feel more and more like I don't know, a little bit like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind a little bit, because it feels like we're in her mind and she only sees what she wants to see. She's editing out the parts that she wants to keep, but she's pushing things out that she doesn't. So yeah, clearly she's having a mental breakdown and we're stuck in her head. I feel like you got like good guys and bad guys. I'm really bad at names, but who was the one? Was it like Geraldine? I'm getting the feeling that maybe she's like the heroes, and then maybe the villains are like, Catherine Hahn and the neighbors, and I don't know. I'm speculating at the moment, but there's definitely like a divide. You have like the sword organization. I don't mean to get all over the place, but I think it's much better. As far as the cons, I mean, I just want more. I feel like I'm watching Lost a little bit, where it's like I've been tricked before, where it's like, here's your mystery box, and traditionally speaking, by the time you get to the end of like season 5 or 6 or whatever it is, it's going to be a letdown. So there is that feeling of, all right, you're pulling me around and you're very front loaded, and I want to be good, but I do have my reservations.
The one thing I will say about that Lost reference is the thing about it, though, it was enjoyable watching the mystery box unfold, even though some people have their gripes with the ending. Whereas right now, I don't find it very enjoyable. I can think of so many different references, so many different books, video games, comics, TV shows even that I've seen that have done this concept, but only way more gripping, way more interesting. I do agree with the overall majority of your point, and just so you know, John, I'm a huge Lost fan, so I will defend that show at every point in turn and try and take a little bit of the heat off it, like in that regards to that, if I can help it. But also that did kind of bode into my point here, because I think like there's this network show, Wayward Pines. I think it aired on ABC or NBC, like super network TV, like the tail end of network TV, 2015 to 2016. Really cool miniseries.
I saw Matt Dillon, right?
Exactly. And
okay, yeah.
And I enjoyed it, but the thing is, it was very network-y style writing, very tropey, very cliche, but that had way more interesting tie-ins to the world and to what's going on, and sort of like, oh, is this fake? Are they imagining this? Is this actually happening? Than what WandaVision's giving us. Like WandaVision's like even more clean and PC, for lack of a better word, than that network show that I wrote about this crazy dark doctor who was overwatching them from a tower because they're the last people of humanity. And if they can survive, then maybe they can rebuild a society. It's like even that show had more interesting things, like crickets in the grass, but they weren't actually crickets. It was a speaker playing the sound of crickets in the bushes, and when he looks into the bushes, he looks over his shoulders and some of the townsfolk are looking at him. Where are those moments that build suspension in this show? Suspense, not suspension, sorry. I just feel like this is such a poor example of the premise, and it's like this is like what to not do for this type of premise. And so if you want to learn how to write this type of story, you need to watch WandaVision's episode at least 1 through 3 to realize, like, hey, this is not a way to get viewers. This is a way to not get viewers gripped out the gates. It's like, so I'm very frustrated with it so far. And that's why I kind of like chimed in after your Lost point, because at least with Lost, I was hooked each week. Even when I will admit, as one of the biggest Lost fans, season 6 let me down very hard. I at least was hooked and had enough stock built in where I had to stick to the end there. Whereas if I wasn't covering this week to week, I might have backed out by now. I can give it props in the filmmaking, the homage to, yesteryear. I love classic TV. I grew up watching it in the house. I appreciate it, but it's not enough so far. Yes, the performances are great, but they're not enough for me so far. The mystery is why I'm here, and I'm not getting a good execution of that.
Well, the hook, is the MCU 23 movies that came before it, or was it 29? I've lost track. 23. That's kind of like 23. Okay, so I had it. So that's the hook, and you're right. If this was like a new thing that had no connection to the MCU, it would be canceled in a week. Absolutely. Because unless somebody had like an affinity for TV Land and they thought it was kind of cool, I don't know. It almost feels like Kevin Feige is like, hey, you know what? We have covered every single demographic, but who's not showing up to this MCU? Grandma and Grandpa. Well, you know what? Now we got you covered, baby. And I don't know. I mean, all right. I guess.
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie. The stylisms have not bothered me overall, and just kind of the idea of just like writing something for viewers. I think that comment just bothers me overall because that's just so limiting to creativity. But what I will say is that I'm still doing what I did last week, which is I'm kind of putting aside my kind of aversion to the stylistic choices and still respecting the overall mystery. And I really liked it because this episode specifically made some very, very direct hints at that. It's kind of weird. I'm assuming that Disney is just monitoring everybody that's reviewing it right now when they did the Ultron and Pietro drops and they had Wanda singing in Russian. Oh man, and also I wanted to give props to Vision too because I think they did a really smart thing in this episode, which is they start to have Vision become self-aware of the fantasy as well, not just kind of the people around it. And even though it's not completely specified yet, you begin to see where certain of the characters stand. If Catherine Hahn and her husband are actual kind of deceivers and not a part of this reality, they just somehow got in. They're doing a very good job of masking it. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for poor Geraldine, or AKA Monica Rambeau, daughter of Maria Rambeau from Captain Marvel, the little girl from Captain Marvel. That's who that is, portrayed by Teyonah Parris. And she did not do a very good job of concealing the fact that she's working for SWORD, who is very, very clearly working with the FBI and invested in this. And that's how Jimmy Woo's and Kat Dennings are involved. And so. But that being said, I'm still getting a lot out of it. I'm still in suspension each week. Every time I feel myself starting to get a little bit bored with it. Something kicks in and it's okay, yeah, now we're getting there. Chris, in a weird way, I'm starting to begin to understand why you were so obsessed with Lost, because if this is how it felt week to week, it's okay. Now, granted, I know this could never be to the same level as that, but still, I think you can understand my sentiment.
I understand your sentiment, but I just don't see that happening here. I think what's happening here really is just brainwashing from 23 movies that people settled for, and people just being so happy to finally get something new. And so that now that it's finally new and it's in a new way too, distributed week by week in a half-hour sitcom style story, which has never been done before by this greater universe, people are just making excuses for it. I'm not saying you're doing that, because you actually get in there and critique the filmmaking and dissect it in a way that makes sense. You actually back up your point, unlike so many of these other people that are just reviewing it week to week. But let me just say, like I said, I think they're doing an amazing job. Kind of like you said, Burns, going back to the TV Land section, paying nice homage to that. I think that they know the time frame that they're working in, and it doesn't feel forced. It feels very organic. It feels very natural. All the little sitcom-y tropes of back then, sprinklers going on. It's very physical humor, which they had a lot of back then. Homage to the slapstick era, which I know this isn't slapstick, but you have those funny sort of household things happening. There's the stork walking around. It's quirky. She never notices it. Okay, I get it. That made audiences laugh back in the day. And as TV was developing, ideas were being tried and stuff. I understand. I think that's really cool. But to me, just the way that they're sort of the pacing is, I think, my real issue here. The dissemination of it, I think it needs to move at a faster pace, because I still don't feel hooked, and we're 3 episodes in. And because I know these 23 movies that came before it, and because I actually have enjoyed some of them, and I actually have thought that there were a lot of actual interesting plot lines in those 23 movies, that factors into my opinion of this is a very weak series so far, because you can't not talk about this without talking about the history of the MCU, right? And so with that being said, I feel very lackluster. I feel very let down.
Interesting point.
Do you think it could be because we're not in a movie, we're actually in a TV show?
I think it's the way they distributed the TV show. I actually agree with Jay when he asks, and I said this last week as well, would this have been better being binge-worthy? I think so. I think you want to get right to the mystery, and if the first 3 episodes so far have only given you the slightest hint of what's going on, I don't know. It hasn't hooked me, and I think if it was bingeable, I may be more forgiving, because I said, okay, well, they're half-hour each. I can watch 3 tonight, two more in the morning when I wake up, and in a 12-hour period, I'm sucked into the middle of this thing, whereas I have to wait week by week by week,
Even if they gave us half the season, that would have been an improvement, I think.
Which was the original plan, because the original plan was to do 6, and then they upped it to 9 when they dropped the first 2.
And I think that hurts them. I honestly think that hurts them.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, does it seem like there's much here? What do I seem like right now? Do I seem like I'm just critiquing it to be that guy, or am I making valid points? Like, I'm literally asking you guys, like, what do you think?
It
How do I
does.
sound?
Now that you say that, it does feel like they added, was I guess 30% more filler to pad the storyline. I guess, right?
Yeah, like,
no.
was it good
yeah.
B-roll takes, and were they like, we got to use this, and like this is going to be
Well,
our
no,
money maker?
it's just like, well, we're gonna add more of the sitcom-y stuff, and then everything that was every little gimmick, every little like, hey, that's funny. They probably just put it back in.
Yeah,
right, like who goes back to the editing room floor and picks up the pieces of like cut film?
They had access to the studios overall, and they just used their space in order to fill up the first couple of episodes so they could do more sitcom homages rather than just jumping to the story automatically. That's what I will say. And that is what I think was lost from the bouncing from 9 to 6 episodes overall. And with that being said, kind of, I mean, I don't know. That's the problem. Like, to me, the biggest takeaway for me is that there's not that much left to talk about overall. It's like, it sounds like we're on repeat kind of, but we just rinse and repeat, Because even though the stylisms, I feel like, could provide enough, gateway for a conversation, it doesn't feel like they do, because it's like, oh, we don't want to talk about the filmmaking because, we've seen it before. It's boring and repetitive. We don't want to talk about the script. The plot lines, though, as far as like the hints to the greater MCU, even those, it's like almost like this show is kind of depending on them in a very strange way, like the subtle hints they're making them like part of the plot now. That to me is still like kind of the only self-referential part that's sticking through. And I'm still wondering if kind of the comic booky nature of how they're distributing these stories now, with each story taking on such a vastly different genre, how that's going to do in the long run. That's kind of what I'm interested in as far as why I continue to consume their content.
Yeah, like this was like just another sort of hard episode to get through. And it's crazy to say that because they put so much into this. It's like it's first of all, their second flagship show that really is of note that isn't an animation outside of The Mandalorian on their brand new streaming service, which is just about to round a year old, if not just hit a year old. They don't have much on this service that's been around forever, aside from a giant back catalog, which granted they do have, but now they're getting into original content. And all we're doing right now is figuring out how to talk about it. What does that say? It's like, what does that mean? Yeah, Mandalorian was awesome. I really liked season 2. But it's just like, don't you expect more from the MCU? Even me, someone who hates it, I at least expected a bar of quality, considering they have such a formula. I at least expected it to be a baseline level of solid.
We're saying this now, and in 4 weeks, we could be saying the total opposite.
Right, and I will give each episode a chance.
I think you're right that time will not be kind to the show. You're right, because right now we're watching it going, oh, well, you know what? We're all stuck inside. We're all kind of like, things are the way they are. We just want new content. So, yeah, in 5 years, we're going to look back and go, let me ask you a question, because I'm a little late to the party on like this news story. Was it always intended to be 9? Like, was this a thing that happened after 2020 and they said, we need to delay filming Winter Soldier? We need to, like, is it like a side effect of 2020 that they made it 9 episodes and not 6?
Well, as of right now, the only thing I know is that filming began in April of last year and it was delayed. So I think the original plan was for all of them to debut in fall of last year, and unfortunately filming was, put on hold. So I think the original plan was to put out the 6, but at the same time, that could have also just been a marketing strategy, because studios do that all the time where they say, oh, it's going to be a certain amount of episodes, then they tack on like 1 or 2 extra episodes at the end. I've seen that happen plenty of times before. So once COVID happened, they came back in November and finished shooting there. And that's where I'm assuming the extra episodes came on and then when they decided to invest in the strategy following the Star Wars strategy, that's kind of where they got their ilk from.
It does feel like they were trying to give the other shows a little bit of padding, a little bit of time.
Right. But to agree with Chris's point, though, I will say that, again, where it differs is that The Mandalorian is episodic. It kind of, each story to me is still standalone enough that you can enjoy it week to week overall. I think WandaVision is a show that would have benefited from binging because of how the overall mystery is spread throughout it. And I think that, again, I've seen a lot of comments on this saying that binge viewing is kind of ruining the experience for these types of shows, because the fact that the studio still can't differentiate between which shows should be dropped at once versus which shows should be dropped week to week as far as their overall marketing strategy. But again, we're only saying that as far as how the story goes, because I know people who are watching it and they're still enjoying it week to week, and I feel like they would be enjoying it even if we weren't in lockdown,
Well, I mean, I think the week to week is kind of a thing that a lot of people kind of do miss. Like they used to call it the water cooler talk. It would be like, you would talk about, hey, did you see the new show? You can't do that. For one, even if you both are equally caught up on a show, you can't talk about 10 hours of a show without your mind melting. Like, oh yeah, remember in episode 2? Like, not really, because that was, it all kind of melts together. So I understand like wanting to bring that back, and it's kind of good, but this is not the show for it at all. I just watched The Boys. That was the show, because at least week to week things kind of happen. The middle was a little slow, but and like you said, Chris, and Lost was like the definitive week to week show that people would talk about. But you don't have that anymore. And this show should have been a binge. It should have been one block, or it should have been more compelling.
I totally see that point, and I wish it was, because I actually think that there's something that is lost when it comes to pop culture and fandoms in regards to losing that week-to-week water cooler. I mean, we're trying to recreate that right now, obviously. We hope the chat interacts. We have guests on each week for this series because we had high hopes for this show. Because I also like, let's like, I do want to get back to WandaVision, but to make my point, and then I do have a point for you, Dom, off what you just said, but to make my point about sort of your water cooler thing, because that is an interesting topic. Look at Cobra Kai. That was an awesome third season. I don't know if you watched it, but I'm sure you've at least seen the impact it's had in pop culture. It was number 1 on Netflix for like 3 weeks, but now it's gone because they dropped it all at once. It was bingeable. It's out of the zeitgeist. All the YouTubers stopped making videos on it at least 2 weeks ago, and now we wait and we forget about it until it comes out again. So I think it comes down to like writing. And something I've kind of noticed going back and watching a lot of older movies, especially older science fiction movies. Like I just watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That was one of the most compelling science fiction films from 1956 that I've ever watched, and they couldn't show the crazy aliens. They couldn't show anything because they didn't have the technology or the budget to do it, but the writing was so strong that I was scared. I was into it. I was wondering if the characters were going to make it out alive. Whereas this kind of seems to, like Jay saying in the chat, sort of relying more, in my opinion, on like the tie-ins, on the Easter eggs, whereas it doesn't seem to be as focused on the plot, making it compelling each week as I would want. Because let's be honest, you said it before we went live, that episode where Wanda and, the Vision are doing that little stupid gum in his gears pun magic show, that was a poor excuse for an episode. I mean, if that's like, because the old sitcoms of the day, yes, they're corny, yes, they're cliche, but they were actually good. That's why they're like some of the Hallmark shows of all time. It's just a different time, so the sensibilities aren't as modern, but the writing was still 10 times better than what we've gotten, in my opinion.
Yeah, one thing I've learned one thing I've learned is that what's it called, from a couple of the podcasts that I've listened to, is that when it comes to kind of, Chris, to bounce off your point about the comparison to older TV shows, all those older TV shows always had lessons of the week. Every single time, no matter how it ended, no matter how kind of nonsensical the episode got, there was always a lesson to be learned. Marvel is not taking that approach at all. They're just making the ending yet another tie-in and yet another cliffhanger in order to keep you invested. They're literally taking the Walking Dead strategy for this show. But guess what? That show had millions of viewers for a lot of years overall, and that strategy worked. And it seems to be working again here overall. But with that being said, it's still kind of interesting how that factors into it, because they can just kind of lean into this and it'll get eyeballs based off of just, embodying the comic book without actually having to be about anything, which to me is very, very interesting, kind of.
Yeah, but it's interesting on paper. I think what we're getting is the execution of that, and it's the farthest thing from interesting. I mean, Dom, that actually, I'm glad you brought us there. Then, John, I do want to get to what you were going to say. But what kind of started this little thought train was you had said earlier that, sort of bouncing back, talking about our positives and negatives, it felt to me like you actually didn't enjoy this episode as much as you did week 1 or 2. So if that's the case, what kind of happened between your, week
I enjoyed
one
this episode
sort of
a lot. I enjoyed this episode a lot. I'm just talking about kind of the examination of of kind of how they're expanding with their comic book storytelling and kind of seeing if they can get away from kind of the normal, like, kind of lesson of the week mentality overall, Like, what was learned from this episode? What was learned from the last 2 episodes? Literally nothing. They were literally just plays on sitcom formulas, fully aware of the fact that they are in repetitive sitcom formulas. But the point is that theme is still continued to this week, where it is just a distraction, kind of, And not to mention the fact that they centered an entire storyline around a setup for a potential Young Avengers, as well as how that's going to factor into Wanda's final breakdown, which comes, again, there's so much, I feel like we're going to have so much to talk about with connections to the comic books here, but
I guess I just think I see your point, but I just think that it's okay if they choose not to sort of pay homage to like the lesson of the week. But what they do to sort of push together this like weird kind of like, does she realize what's going on? Like what's happening behind the curtain? The little bits of like, the B-man from last week. Or for example, at the end of this week, like that character who helped deliver her baby acting all weird and freaky, saying that thing about Ultron, they haven't been strong enough to grip me. So if the sitcom writing is going to be thin and not have a lesson of the week or just be kind of so zany that it doesn't make sense or it's not entertaining, what they're doing in regards to the overall storyline, which I think is where we'll get to, the crazy part of this, like the mind war part, hasn't been strong enough to pull me in. So I see your point, but it's just not working for me. I don't know. What about you, John?
I'm willing to give it a little bit more slack and see where it goes. I mean, it's still pretty early. I mean, like you said, I didn't realize it was 9. I thought it was like maybe 7 or 8. But knowing that, I mean, we're only a third in, so this is the end of Act 1, I guess.
Yes.
In season 1. So, like you said, I don't expect them to do a lesson of the week. I think it's just, like I said, more of that Eternal Sunshine type of deal where she's kind of trying to deflect reality and not deal with whatever problems that are going on in her head, and she's just in denial about essentially everything, and she's made some type of little box that she's living in. I'm willing to give it a little bit more slack. I mean, like you said before, we are in a time where we're kind of starving for new content, and typically, in my opinion, the MCU, if nothing else, it's been average or above. It's never been tremendously awful. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't read any of the House of M kind of stuff. I mean, I kind of don't want to spoil too much or know too much. I kind of have I heard some videos about like what it could be and Manifesto, all that kind of stuff, but I really don't want to. I remember I read was Captain America: Civil War. They take little nuggets and a little bit, but I don't know. It's not great. I mean, on the upside, at least they're not an hour a piece. At least they're only 20 minutes. Can you imagine if there was 9 of these and they were 57 minutes each?
Oh God, don't
Terrible.
even.
That's
Terrible.
torture.
Right?
That would be awful.
They would have made Vision going to get the doctor a whole thing. They would have just stretched that out,
Right.
and it would have
He
been.
bumps into a milkman. He spills the milkman's drink. He has to go and refill the milkman's supply before he goes to get to the doctor. It'd be so terrible. I totally agree.
I also
It already kind of sounds like a better show, though.
It does. That's what I'm saying. Okay, that's what I'm saying. I'm sorry, John, but I didn't mean to cut you off. But I hear your points. I am going to still give it a chance. Don't think I'm not, John. But this is the MCU. They have unlimited resources at their disposals. They could get the best writers of our day to work on this thing, and this is what we get. I just don't want to let them off the hook. Maybe I'm the only person in the world that won't let him off the hook. But what we're getting right now, it feels like film school grad gets hired on first show as showrunner, and there's going to be a few mistakes like Lovecraft Country, but we're learning, so it's okay. Whereas this, it's okay, cool. I might, if I had a Disney Plus subscription, I would think about canceling it. I don't. Dom's a very good friend.
Yeah,
and I'm glad that Dom is such a good friend.
But to be fair, Act 1 of anything is usually just okay. You're just meeting the
Disagree
characters.
fully, but
I mean,
yeah, I gotta disagree with you there, man. Honestly, I hate to do it. I just think Act 1 of maybe these formulaic Marvel films aren't always the best, but for example, I was just watching a little bit of Lord of the Rings as I was getting ready, just tossed it on, whatever. I'm gripped, dude. When Frodo meets Gandalf for that first time, Gandalf comes down the mountain, a wizard is never late. I'm hooked instantly. I don't care what's going on. It could be the worst dialogue ever. It's just so well written that I'm like, oh, cool. These characters feel real. They feel alive. And I'm just into it. So I just think it's poor writing and poor pacing. And I think that's what's killing the show. And it's so weird to say that because I think the filmmaking, the cinematography, and the mise-en-scène, the atmosphere of back in the day, the old sitcoms, is done so well, but it seems thin around all that, which sucks because I wanted to like this. You can ask Dom, me being the guy who doesn't like Marvel that much, I've been hyped on this because I read House of M. So much better. John, don't read that if you want to hate this show. Do not read that. 10
also,
times.
Also, Avengers Disassemble and a couple of other Wanda arcs that this is directly based off of. But yeah, here's the thing about the Scarlet Witch is it's always been a really weird character that the comics have really not known what to do with. Like one minute she can kind of just like wave and levitate objects, and the next minute she kind of like has these reality altering powers, and the next minute it's like it's never kind of clearly been defined overall. And I feel like the show is definitely a reflection of that. And I feel like it's subjective whether that works or not. But that's what I mean kind of when it goes back to like kind of the comic book version of storytelling. This is probably one of the most direct adaptations I've seen, like of all of the MCU adaptations, kind of. You know, all of the rest of the MCU adaptations are like loosely alluding to the source material. But Jay, we did talk about this, and Lovecraft Country sucks. But yeah.
Sorry, Jay.
Like,
great pilot.
Yeah.
I will
like
give him that.
Does that make sense though, as far as that goes?
I mean,
felt like was
yeah,
kinda
I know what you guys are saying, but like I'm gonna take like the Kevin Smith point of view, if I will, because
All right.
I'm a little bit older than you guys. You guys are a little bit younger. I was around during the time when X-Men was a big deal, or Blade was a big deal, and you talk about direct adaptations. You watch that first X-Men, and it's like they're wearing leather because it's almost like the Matrix was big at the time. And so like yeah, and it was this thing where it was like it couldn't be the comic, it had to be a movie with a little bit of elements from the comics. Now it's reversed. Now it's like fully blown comics. So when I get something like WandaVision, man, we've come so far from nothing to this. To me, it's nitpicky, and yeah, it's not always going to be great. There's some of the MCU movies I thought were kind of like bleh. Like Guardians 2, bleh. I mean, in my opinion.
Hard disagree.
Yeah, well, you know what? But even that, there are scenes in that movie that are really good, but then there's a lot of like other stuff. I'm like, eh. I will take it back because like I do like the ending of that movie, but all of it is like, how can you really complain? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, is that kind of and granted, WandaVision was never a show that I had extremely high expectations for in the first place. So I can't say that they were ever like broken or I'm like, oh my God, this is not what I thought it would be. Like I had like average expectations and they're pretty much met at average. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
I do see what you mean in the regards to like how can you complain? I mean, the superhero medium has come such a long way where I feel like for the most part we get more quality films than we do I mean, let's not talk about DC, but like we get more quality films than we do sub-quality, at least in the MCU. And like there's even films in the MCU, like I love Thor the Dark World for the drama aspects of it. I thought that was actually a bit of a different step and really well done. And there are a lot of people who actually even like their worst films. So I understand what you're saying. And I will admit, you just met me tonight for the first time, 5 minutes before we went live. I've never been the biggest superhero guy on screen because I feel like it tries to appease too many different walks of life. And so they get away from the characters that I read on the page, because I read all these guys on the page for the most part first as a comic reader before I got to see them on the big screen. So I always feel like you lose a little something because they're just trying to put as many butts in seats as they can. So I do
see,
know
and that's the point I want to make before. I don't mean to cut you off, but that was the point I was going to make before, is that you're right. I purposely did not want to go and read House of M or anything like that. The Vision comic, I think there's another one that's kind of based on. Because quick example, I personally hate the movie Ready Player One. I read the book and then I saw the movie, and I'm like the one guy of all the people I know. My girlfriend doesn't like it either because she read the book too. But of everybody that I talk about this movie, they're like, "Oh my God, it's amazing!" And I'm like, I fucking hate it because I read the book. So knowing that, I don't read the comics that are attached to the MCU because I know it'll only, like you said, ruin it for me. You know what I mean?
Definitely don't do
I
that.
go in there as like a blank page and just kind of, see what's what.
Yeah. So with that being said, we're getting a little bit down there. So I definitely think we need to move on to MVP overall. So hard as it may seem, we have to award an MVP, which is basically, John, you're new here, so it's basically any aspect of the show, person, character, director, behind-the-scenes stage, performer, anything kind of. And honestly, my MVP tonight is the set designers, because just for how beautifully they recreate the sets, kind of, and really embody it and make us feel like we're back in like one of those, like, I don't know, this was kind of throwing off like a late 70s, early 80s vibe, like, but I could just
Brady Bunch style
like,
thing.
Yeah, Brady Bunch style, but I could just easily see like that 70s show taking place in this one, or like Home Improvement, I was getting strong vibes from that, but I'm assuming we'll hit that later on. But so that's my MVP of the night.
Yeah, it's That's a solid one. And I hate to echo it, but I feel the same exact way. I share the same sentiment. I think really the set designers, man, I mean, they never get love. Let's give them love. They're killing it. They
Yeah, for real.
actually
They're actually
legitimately.
crushing it. They actually have work to do now instead of just decorating a green stage.
And you know what's really cool too? I actually enjoy the live audience. It really is. I think it's a nice touch
Well,
because they do like that classic thing on the microphone. This is like an audio guy thing, but like it's a little too hot. The mic's a little too hot. So when the audience really gets rowdy, it has like that slight little grit to it, and it feels very old school. And it's a nice touch. It's a nice little touch.
Yeah, what I was gonna ask is, Chris, did you notice that how like the audience is there like hard at the beginning, and then as the episode goes on, they slowly go away. Even like the funnier, more lighthearted moments, like the audience like completely goes away, and by the end of the episode, it's gone. Like I'm wondering if that's like an intentional choice.
I did not notice that. That seems like an intentional choice. That's really cool. That's what I'm saying. Like all the extra things are working for this. Like the score in each episode kind of being uniquely tied to the premise and the era that they're in. This having that very like late 60s, sort of 70s custom intro, the super long sitcom intro song. Just when you think it's going to end, there's a second half to the song. It's like the little things in this show that work, which really upset me when we look at it as an overall picture. But yeah, I'm with you, Dom. Like the costume designs, the people that never get love essentially are my MVPs for this episode.
Yes, they deserve.
What about you, John?
I'd agree with that, but just not to double dip into having the same answer. I think Paul Bettany is kind of underrated in all this because I'm sure he looks at this and goes like, "What are we doing? This is not what we typically do with Vision." But of all the characters I've seen in the show thus far, I feel like he understands what the sitcom is, and he feels the most authentic to the genre. Like I look at Elizabeth Olsen or Catherine Hahn, and like it doesn't really feel great. Like it's not quite like on the nose, but I feel like with Bettany, he feels very Dick Van Dyke-y, and he just gets it, and he can make that switch from that sitcom to that scene where he's like, very serious and stoic, and he's like, something's not right with this. And then he's back in it again. So as much as we don't like those scenes where he's like, I've got gum in my gears, and he's like, now I'm drunk, he does understand it, and he does deliver on what is being asked of him. So I'm going to give it to Paul Bettany.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good
just
choice.
Before we move on to the next segment, because Dom, if you remember last week, I, wasn't too impressed with his performance, but
yes,
this is what I try and do each week. I try to keep an open mind, and I was actually gonna, until I can't deny, like the behind the scenes people are my MVPs. Paul Bettany is certainly my honorable mention because I get it now. I understand it. I now know it's not for me, but I didn't know if it was for me last week, and I didn't quite fully get it. But now I do have to agree with everything you just said, John. He's just as charming as I think all the cast is really working with what they got very well. I enjoy I enjoy everything that usually complements a great movie. That's happening in this show.
It's just not the story or the.
It's just not the story. Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's so weird.
I'm glad we were able to figure this out. I feel like we had a good therapy session here.
I needed it. I really did.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's move on to greater connections to the MCU and comic books that inspired it before we wrap it up and get out of here. So, despite there being relatively little that actually happened, there was a lot of reference in there. First of all, let's talk about the big Easter egg at the end. Obviously, once Monica Rambeau is revealed with her sword pendant being a dead giveaway for the fact that she is working for the Organization of Sword, which was, of course, revealed in Spider-Man Far From Home. What did we think of that overall? We see like her get tossed outside of a shield, and it's this kind of annihilation-looking shield-esque thing. So, what are our thoughts on that overall?
Oh yeah, John, you can go, man. I feel like I've been talking all freaking night.
Okay, so you're gonna have to remind me a little bit. Far From Home had a reference to the Cross organization,
it's called Sword.
Sword. Okay. It's been a minute since I've seen that, so you gotta.
Okay, so post-credit scene, Sam Jackson wakes up after having been called by Talos, who's on Earth. It's the Skrull from Captain Marvel, and he's been working with Fury for all these years. They're gonna have a Disney Plus show coming up called Secret Invasion. Talos is posed as Nick Fury on Earth, and he calls Nick Fury, who's in like some sword satellite, like who knows how far in space. And that is when Sword was officially established.
Okay, so I was gonna say, like, I don't remember anything like Peter Parker. That makes sense now. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I I know you guys are doing like connections to the comics. I can't say I've read a lot of comics related to the storyline at hand, so it's kind of, which is fine because, like you said, like we talked about earlier, I don't want to be that guy who's like, well, I read the book and the book is better, because I know it's not going to deliver. It's kind of like we said earlier. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah,
My apologies.
So she gets tossed
No, it's
outside
all
of the
good.
so she gets tossed outside of the Annihilation Wall after she directly references two previous things that happened
Sure.
in the MCU, which is funny considering the fact that she references the most controversial and especially this movie's reputation has kind of not evolved well due to obviously the actions involving its creator, being Avengers: Age of Ultron, the death of Wanda's twin brother Pietro, portrayed in that version by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Ms. Murder by Ultron, portrayed by James Spader. So just the kind of the bring up of those two hints that we're going to see those two later on down the line, obviously, how that harkens back to Avengers: Age of Ultron. And kind of, it's interesting again because this is the sense of where they mix it in with original MCU lore, because in the MCU comics, there was this one reality that Wanda was living where she was living not quite a sitcom lifestyle, but an ideal lifestyle with her two twin babies who... it was eventually revealed that it was all an illusion.
What a long question.
It was eventually revealed to be an illusion generated by Agatha Harkness and Mephisto, whom Wanda had literally made a deal kind of with the devil, basically. And once she discovered that, it caused her mind to literally break, and that's what she caused the Avengers Disassembled storyline. And her two children, however, survived eventually. They grew up to become Billy Kaplan and Teddy Shepard. Yep, Teddy Shepard, who eventually became founding members of the Young Avengers, who were eventually founded, who have been largely hinted at from the greater overall MCU, as having a lot of them been introduced subtly in Endgame and the Ant-Man movies. And here we have two more, as you literally saw Wanda and Vision arguing over the names Billy and Teddy, if it was a boy,
Right.
and then it turned out to be two boys. So we can assume that those are Wiccan and Speed, who are kind of, basically think of it as that even though Wiccan has Scarlet Witch's powers, she's a younger version of Thor, and Speed is basically like Quicksilver 2.0. So
Gotcha.
Get all that?
it's a lot.
Yeah,
but,
I still don't hear a question.
well, that wasn't a question. That was just more so just kind of like, that was more so just kind of like acknowledging all the references. And
That was like Marvel Legends on speed. It was like, thanks for the recap.
I haven't even gotten to Sword yet.
Oh man. Well, listen, I'll just chime in about all that. I don't care, to be honest with you.
Man.
Yeah,
I really don't
that's-
care about any of that.
same here.
It's, Young Avengers, cool. Like Nova's cool. I like that character, but just give it to me already. And if I like it when I watch it, I'll praise it. And if I don't, I won't.
Oh my god.
Like I don't care, man. No, it's not that I'm impatient. It's that I'm patient. 23 movies, years of just being led on and strung along for lackluster plots and lackluster payoffs. I'm over it, is what I am, really, for the most part. And so I don't care, just give me a good show that I'm watching right now. It doesn't always have to tie into something in the future that's going to be awesome. I want to enjoy what I'm spending my time with in the moment. That's kind of what
I agree with you, Chris, on a certain level with that, because like I'm not the giant like comic book nerd with this plot line. So like you're not going to sell me on, oh my God, the Easter eggs. You're going to sell me on what you were doing in this actual episode and this actual show. If we could talk about something that just happened with like the characters, then great. But if you're going to be like, hey, look, did you see that Easter egg? I'm like, okay. That's not storytelling. That's just fanboying, I guess.
Yeah. It's like what's that term people throw at like politicians? They don't like lip service. You're just saying things that I want to hear, but you're not really giving me anything. That's how I feel about it. It's exactly how I feel about it. But anyways, Dom, Sword. You said there was a tie-in with Sword, which was another thing they dropped that I thought was just lip service. But what do you know about it that I don't? Maybe change my mind.
So Sword, it's basically kind of a secondary organization that was founded after kind of SHIELD collapse. It stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department. It basically is in this giant satellite called the Peak hovering over Earth, and they basically keep an eye on more so extraterrestrial threats. But considering that we know that the multiverse is going to play a large part coming up in future MCU properties, we can assume that this is why they are the organization that has taken place, that has kind of been investigating. But kind of the theory that was kind of awakened in me that I wanted to bring up before we get out of here is the idea that, so we've been discussing largely the idea that this is that this will tie heavily into Doctor Strange, but what if this is another reality and this isn't actually our Wanda and Vision? I don't know if that'll actually happen, but it was a potential possibility that I was thinking of.
I hate that.
Oh man.
Why do you hate that?
Wouldn't it be something if they put something on us like that?
It just seems like a little too much. I mean, Why? Because like Spider-Verse, we're gonna do that whole.
Only because that portal that Monica Rambeau got thrown through, it looked kind of like almost like a ripple between dimensions, kind of. And like I'm really interested in like I want to know how this is gonna tie in with other dimensions because like multiverse storytelling, I love that shit. Like I need that injected directly into my veins.
I do, but I don't. I think you're kind of you're getting ahead of yourself a little bit because they're going to do that. They're going to tie that together with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, but I'm betting Doctor Strange will be the one to kind of bring that into the fold. I don't think it's going to be this early in the game.
So you think Doctor Strange is the secret cameo they've hinted at?
No, but like I said, as far as like the multiverse, I don't think we're going to do that yet. Not at least based on what I've seen in this.
I think that I'm with you, John, in regards to not wanting that to be the case, because I think to open up Phase 4 with a storyline that essentially doesn't even matter in regards to all 23 movies that we've seen, directly affecting it rather. Of course, with the multiverse, everything's in game, which is like the ultimate comic book cop-out, but DC does it too. I can't hate. I actually enjoy it, but it's just like, I get it. I understand why you have that sort of like, hey, let's just break the sandbox because we need to keep selling units and stuff. I get it. And they did cool things with it, but
that's the problem I have with this right now is that like there are no stakes because as far as I could tell, and I didn't read the comics, I'm under the impression that we're inside her mind and that everything we're seeing is just like kind of her trying to work out things in her subconscious, but there's no stakes to anything. Like a dream can end, it can move on. So what? So that's kind of my biggest gripe with this show because there's no ticking clock. There's nothing that makes me go, well, if this happens or doesn't happen, why should I care? And that's kind of why it's a little slow for me right now. Why should I care?
I totally agree with that. And I think the multiverse can be done really, really well. I mean, I actually really enjoy the character of Doctor Strange. Dom and I famously had to leave the theater halfway through.
What a fun time that was! That was our first movie we ever saw together in the theaters, and we had to leave because somebody set off the fire alarm.
Someone in our theater, John, smoked a cigarette, and we were like
a vape. They smoked a vape.
Oh, a vape in the bathroom.
They set off the fire alarms with a vape. The thing that's designed
to make you
not set off fire alarms.
We had gotten to the part in the movie where like the walls are starting to bend and stuff.
Yes.
In the city, and then we leave, and I was like, oh man, I was actually like, that's a Marvel film. I was really enjoying.
I was high out of my mind when I watched that. Like,
beyond
gone.
Well, it is Doctor Strange, so like, who didn't go and see it?
Well, I made a point. Like, they told me what to do that, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that, and I still wasn't impressed by that movie.
But I was actually really liking it, and then I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. I think that he's really works in the role. Cumberbatch, I believe, is his name, and so I would be cool with that. But I just think like to show your hand that early, where's the lead up? Where's the nuance? Where's the finesse to get to like the multiverse and to sort of bring in these new characters, all these new films we're going to get in Phase 4. I think if they did what you said, Dom, it would just really discredit this new era, we need a new villain. Thanos isn't here anymore. It would really just turn it into a CW wanky bonkers universe where they clearly did not know how to handle after a short time 4 different shows, and they used the multiverse and it got real messy, and you went from loving it each week, understanding what it was, but loving it, to like not watching it after like season 3 or 4, which I know a lot of people walked away from like the Flash and Arrow. So it's
too big after Endgame.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why we got to come back. I mean, look, we got to dial it back and then rebuild.
Yeah, look, the one thing that I will say is that, look, I knew that that kind of our version of the MCU that we knew was never going to be the same going forward past Endgame. And as far as this being a radical shift in direction, that's kind of the thing that I'm still admiring of them, and that's the thing that's still kind of keeping me invested throughout all of this, But what's it called? But as far as kind of Disney never really having the resource to do it, this is just what they choose to do it with. They want to do it with family-friendly fun, and this is the easiest way to do that. So
my last question then, I want to get both of you guys' opinions on this, and then we can sort of wrap this thing up and head out of here. Are you guys fearful for the MCU going forward now?
No.
Do you think that's it? We've peaked. We can't get back to where we were?
I feel like that's a subjective take because they are clearly show that they are having uncontinued, unbridled success, so they're just going to keep doing what they do. And as far as whether they'll fail, well, no, not for a long, long time, just as far as if they continue to experiment around like this with their structure. But I think as far as taste goes, they'll gain new watchers, and, only time will tell as far as that goes.
Yeah, I just think multiverse out the gates is not the right way to sort of let people know your new direction is going to be as good as the old one. But John, what's your take on all that?
Am I fearful for the MCU? No, not really. Not in the least. I mean, it's Disney. They're the biggest company on the planet. You know, if anything, like they might look at some of the comments and some of the feedback and go, okay, we need to course correct a little bit. We might hit that bubble of people getting tired of superheroes a little bit. That might be a thing. But nah, man, this is here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It
Real
might
quick,
dip. It might kind of lose quality, but it's, you know, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah,
Real quick,
I mean, I've been over it, so I was just sort of asking to get your guys' opinions. You seem a little more hopeful than me, so.
Yeah, well, I'm still gonna watch it week to week overall, because it's January.
Right.
And there's nothing else to watch right now. But Jay, I wanted to real quick say that a topic of movies to get high before watching. Oh man, I've got some stories I can tell, and I can also make that into a top 10 list. That would be
We'll save
amazing.
that for our next Talkin' TV after midnight.
Yeah, we'll save that for this. Yeah, we'll save that for this year's 420. We can do a 420 celebration on it.
Oh wow. Well, anyways, this was cool, guys. John, really enjoyed having you come and hang.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Appreciate it. So, Dom, is there anything else you wanted to talk about here on our episode 3 journey?
Well, I was gonna say thank you to the people once again for tuning in to another episode. I feel like we kind of talked all that we can talk about with this. Star ratings, I guess, if you want to do those.
Yeah, we have to. It's tradition.
Yeah, I'll give this episode 3.5 out of 5. Again, wasn't great, just continued more of what I was expecting from last week. I really wish I had more to say as far as that goes. But it's like,
speaks to the show. I mean, I think it speaks to the show we're getting. For me, it's a 2 out of 5. It's, just the merits of everything I've said. Everything I like about it isn't enough to keep me hooked and keep me going. And if I wasn't doing the show each week, I may tune out after next week if it's more of the same. If it was just me casually watching this, no podcast, no wanting to dissect it each week, I may tune out. If it was just regular Chris, in a multiverse, the Chris who doesn't have a podcast probably would tune out if we get another episode like this week next week. So 2 out of 5. John, what about you?
I give it a 3. It's pretty average. Feels like an in-between episode, but you do have like an ending that's kind of compelling and kind of head scratchy. So, 3 out of 5.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Good points all around, fellas. We just weren't given the best episode. I mean,
correct.
It just speaks to the
not a
show
lot
we're
to talk
getting.
about once again. But thank you to the people who once again tuned in to yet another episode of our WandaVision recap episode. We have 6 more weeks of this to go, people. So be sure to tune in for that all the way up until the end.
God help
man,
us.
we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it.
Hey, this was fun, guys. If you want me to come back for one of these episodes, let me know. I'll come back.
Oh, we most
come back
definitely
for
will
the
have
finale.
you back.
What we're doing is we're having everyone who's been on each individual week's episode come back for a grand finale, sort of like 2.5 hour panel, depending on how it goes, like wrap up. If you're down for that, we'd love to have you, man. It's gonna be a banger. I'm telling you. Perfect. So, guys, you can check out John in our finale 23 weeks from now when we finally get to the finale.
And John, I was also going to ask, where can the good people find you online?
I'm on everything. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. I have a website. It's burnsreviews.com. Jay Burns at Twitter, Burns Reviews on Instagram. Obviously, I'm right here on YouTube. I got like 3 videos a week, Burns Reviews. So, pretty easy to find. I'll probably comment down below and pin it or something like that. I'm easy to find. You'll find me. I'm on all the social medias. They even got a website. Just launched
You're
it.
the second Jay Burns that I've known in my internet career overall. And once again, thank you to the chat, Jay Manley, Stranger Boy, all the other people who tuned in to us tonight. Overall, it was a lot of fun.
And each week, for that matter, we really appreciate you guys.
Yes, and we really appreciate you guys. But as always, you can click the news people that are coming to the channel can click the subscribe button. They can click the bell next to it. That way they get notified every time we put up new content. We have content that we put up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This coming week, people, it's it. We're finally wrapping up our top 10s of 2020. We're with top 10 best movies of 2020. We're doing it. It's happening on Monday. Tune in at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you want to find out what the 10 best movies of the year as anointed by us are. You can follow us on our Facebook and Instagram at Talkin' TV Podcast, no G overall. We'll be back next week with episode 4. As always, people, watch more movies, watch more TV, and keep being slaves to Disney. We'll see you next week.